There was a time when dinner didn't need to be complicated to feel comforting. For many elderly Americans, especially after long days or quiet evenings alone, meals became simpler, softer, easier, and deeply familiar. These were the suppers made when energy was low, teeth were tired, and cooking felt like a chore. Yet somehow, these dishes still carried warmth, memory, and a sense of home. From creamy casseroles to slow-simmered classics, these no-chew meals weren't just about convenience. They were about survival, comfort, and holding on to tradition. Tonight, we're stepping back into those kitchens, where even the simplest bite told a story worth remembering. The plates sat quietly on the table, steam barely rising, as the evening settled in. There was no rush, no noise, just the soft clink of a spoon against ceramic. For many seniors, especially in the 1940s and 1950s, this moment was familiar. Dinner wasn't about variety or presentation. It was about ease, comfort, and getting through the night with something warm. One of the most common no-chew suppers of that time was creamed chipped beef on toast, often remembered by a less polite nickname whispered in old kitchens. It was simple: dried beef stirred into a thick, milky gravy, poured generously over soft slices of toast that had already begun to soak and surrender. There was no need to chew much. The bread softened quickly, the beef was thin and tender, and every bite melted together into something filling. This dish carried a quiet history. It had roots in military kitchens where it fed soldiers during hard times and later followed them home into everyday life. For older Americans, especially those living alone or on a tight budget, it became a reliable evening meal. Cheap ingredients, quick preparation, and a texture that didn't demand effort, it checked every box. But beyond practicality, there was something else. The warmth of the gravy, the saltiness of the beef, the way it spread across the plate. It felt familiar. It reminded them of younger days, of shared tables, of times when cooking was easier and life felt fuller. Even in silence, with only a dim kitchen light overhead, this humble dish offered more than nourishment. It offered comfort in its simplest form, proving that sometimes the easiest meals carried the heaviest memories. The kitchen was quieter now than it used to be. No sizzling pans, no hurried footsteps, just the low hum of a refrigerator and the faint creak of a chair. For many seniors, especially in the years after families had grown and gone, dinner became something softer, slower, and far less demanding. One such meal was egg drop soup, a dish that required little effort but delivered warmth with every spoonful. It began with a simple broth, often made from bouillon cubes dissolved in hot water. Once the liquid simmered gently, a beaten egg was poured in, swirling instantly into delicate ribbons. There was no need for chewing, no need for preparation beyond a few quiet minutes at the stove. This meal found its place in many American homes during the mid-20th century, especially among those who needed something light but satisfying. It was inexpensive, easy to make, and gentle on the stomach. For seniors dealing with fatigue or dental issues, it became a dependable choice, something they could manage without strain. But what made egg drop soup linger in memory wasn't just its simplicity. It was the way it filled the room with a soft, comforting aroma. The warmth of the bowl in tired hands. The slow rhythm of each spoonful, taken without hurry. It created a moment of calm in an otherwise quiet evening. Even alone, sitting at a small table or by a window fading into dusk, this humble soup offered a sense of peace. It proved that even the lightest meals could carry a quiet kind of comfort, one that stayed long after the bowl was empty. By the time evening came, the effort to cook often felt heavier than the hunger itself. Many seniors learned to rely on meals that asked for very little in return, dishes that could be made quietly, with tired hands and fading light. One of those meals was rice pudding, served not as dessert, but as a simple, filling supper. It usually began with leftover rice, saved carefully from an earlier meal. Nothing was wasted in those kitchens. The rice was placed into a pot with milk, a bit of sugar, and sometimes a dash of cinnamon or vanilla if it was available. Slowly, it would simmer, softening further until the grains nearly disappeared into a thick, creamy texture. There was no chewing required, just a spoon and a steady pace. This dish carried the habits of the Great Depression and the years that followed, when stretching ingredients was a necessity. For seniors who had lived through those times, rice pudding wasn't just practical, it was familiar. It was something they had eaten before, something they trusted. But more than that, it offered a certain kind of quiet comfort. The gentle sweetness, the warmth rising from the bowl, the way it filled the stomach without effort. It made the evening feel a little less empty. It didn't demand attention or energy. It simply existed, ready to be enjoyed without struggle. In homes where conversation had grown rare and time moved slower, this humble supper became more than just food. It became part of a routine, a soft ending to the day, and a reminder that even the simplest things could still bring a sense of ease. The light in the kitchen often dimmed early, long before the night had fully settled in. For many seniors, dinner became less about cooking and more about finding something gentle, something that didn't demand strength or time. On those evenings, a simple bowl of mashed potatoes often became the entire meal. There was nothing complicated about it. Potatoes were peeled slowly, sometimes left unpeeled to save effort, then boiled until they softened enough to break apart with almost no pressure. A bit of milk, a pat of butter if it was available, and a pinch of salt were all it took. Once mashed, the texture became smooth, warm, and easy, something that didn't require chewing, only quiet spoonfuls. This dish had been a staple for generations, especially during times when money was tight and ingredients were limited. Seniors who had lived through hardship knew how to rely on potatoes. They were affordable, filling, and could last for days in a cool pantry. But as time passed, mashed potatoes took on a different role, not just survival, but comfort. What made this meal special wasn't just its simplicity. It was the way it felt. The warmth of the bowl against tired hands. The soft, familiar taste that didn't surprise or overwhelm. It offered consistency in a world that had grown quieter and, at times, uncertain. For someone sitting alone at the table, with only the ticking of a clock nearby, this humble dish provided more than nourishment. It created a moment of stillness, a small sense of peace at the end of the day. In its softness, it carried both memory and ease, asking nothing in return. Some nights, even standing at the stove felt like too much. The idea of chopping, stirring, or waiting for something to cook slowly faded into the background. For many seniors, especially in those quiet later years, dinner became something that needed to be immediate, gentle, and effortless. That's where oatmeal stepped in, not as breakfast, but as a simple evening meal. It didn't take much. A small pot, a handful of oats, and water or milk brought to a soft simmer. Within minutes, the mixture thickened into something warm and smooth, easy to swallow and even easier to prepare. Sometimes a pinch of sugar was added, or a drizzle of syrup if it was on hand. Other times, it was eaten plain, valued more for its comfort than its flavor. Oatmeal had long been a staple in American homes, especially during difficult times. It was inexpensive, reliable, and filling enough to carry someone through the night. For seniors who no longer had the energy to cook full meals, it became a quiet solution, something they could make without thinking, without strain. But beyond its practicality, there was a certain calm that came with it. The gentle bubbling of the pot, the familiar scent rising in the air, the way each spoonful felt soft and steady, it created a rhythm. A routine that didn't demand much, yet offered something in return. In the stillness of the evening, with little more than a dim light and passing thoughts, this humble bowl became enough. It didn't try to impress or satisfy in grand ways. It simply provided warmth, ease, and a small sense of comfort to end the day. By evening, even the smallest tasks could feel overwhelming. Opening cabinets, lifting pots, waiting for water to boil, it all took more effort than it once did. For many seniors, supper became something that needed to be as simple as possible. On nights like these, a bowl of cottage cheese often replaced the idea of cooking altogether. There was no flame, no preparation, no waiting. Just a small container taken from the refrigerator, opened slowly, and spooned into a bowl. Its texture was soft, slightly lumpy, but gentle enough to eat without strain. No chewing, no effort, just quiet, steady bites. Cottage cheese had become popular in American households during the mid-20th century, praised for being affordable and easy to store. For older adults, it offered something even more important. It was dependable. It didn't require energy, and it didn't create a mess that needed cleaning afterward. Sometimes, it was eaten plain. Other times, a small touch of fruit or a sprinkle of sugar was added, depending on what was available. But often, it remained just as it was, simple and unaltered. The kind of meal that asked nothing and gave just enough in return. What made it meaningful wasn't the taste or variety. It was the ease. The quiet relief of knowing dinner didn't have to be complicated. The comfort of sitting down, even alone, with something ready in front of you. In a home where the hours passed slowly and the nights came early, this modest bowl became more than just food. It became a solution, a routine, and a reminder that even the simplest choices could carry a sense of peace at the end of the day. There were evenings when even the thought of cooking felt distant, like a habit from another lifetime. The kitchen remained still, untouched, as daylight slowly disappeared beyond the windows. For many seniors, supper on those nights became something that required no stove at all. A bowl of gelatin, softly set and waiting in the refrigerator, often became the answer. It was already prepared hours earlier, sometimes even the day before. Powder mixed with hot water, stirred gently, then left to cool until it formed that familiar, delicate structure. By evening it was ready, smooth, cool, and effortless to eat. No chewing, no strain, just a spoon gliding through each soft, trembling bite. Gelatin had become a household staple in mid-century America, appearing in everything from desserts to molded salads. But for seniors it took on a quieter role. It was light, easy on the stomach, and simple to prepare in advance. On days when energy was limited, it offered a kind of reassurance. Dinner was already taken care of. There was something almost calming about it. The way it moved slightly with each touch, the coolness against tired hands, the gentle sweetness that didn't overwhelm. It created a small, quiet moment in an otherwise silent evening. Sitting at the table, perhaps with only a faint ticking clock in the background, this simple dish didn't try to replace a full meal. It didn't need to. It provided just enough to carry someone through the night, without effort or expectation. In its softness and simplicity, it became more than a convenience. It became part of a rhythm, one that valued ease, memory, and the quiet comfort of knowing something small was still enough. The evening air often carried a stillness that settled deep into the home. By that hour, energy had already been spent, and even the simplest meals needed to come together without effort. For many seniors, supper became something that could be made in a single pot, with little attention and even less strain. One such meal was soft scrambled eggs. It began with just a few eggs cracked into a bowl, beaten slowly with a splash of milk or water. The pan was warmed gently, never too hot, and the eggs were stirred carefully as they cooked. The goal wasn't firmness, but softness. They were taken off the heat early, while still creamy, so each bite stayed tender and easy to eat. This dish had long been a part of American kitchens, served at breakfast tables for generations. But for seniors, it found a new place at dinner. It was quick, affordable, and didn't require much energy to prepare. Most importantly, it didn't demand chewing. The texture remained smooth, almost delicate, making it ideal for tired evenings. What made soft scrambled eggs stand out wasn't just their simplicity, but the quiet comfort they brought. The warmth rising from the plate, the gentle aroma filling the kitchen, the way each spoonful felt light yet satisfying, it all created a sense of calm. In a home where time moved slower and silence filled the spaces between moments, this small meal became enough. It didn't aim to impress or replace the past. It simply met the present with ease, offering nourishment without effort and comfort without complication, just when it was needed most. Evenings often carried a quiet heaviness, especially for seniors who had spent decades caring for others or working long days. By the time dinner rolled around, the thought of chopping, stirring, or cooking anything complex could feel exhausting. On nights like these, soft, canned soups became a trusted companion, warm, ready-made, and gentle enough to eat without effort. Tomato soup, in particular, held a special place in many homes. Open the can, pour it into a small pot, and warm it slowly. A swirl of cream could be added for richness, but even plain, it was satisfying. The texture was smooth, almost velvety, offering nourishment without chewing. It was easy, reliable, and carried a familiar flavor that many seniors associated with comfort and care. Canned soups had surged in popularity in mid-20th century America, marketed as convenient meals for busy families. But for older adults, especially those living alone or with limited mobility, they became more than convenience. They were lifelines. In the quiet of the evening, a bowl of warm soup didn't just fill the stomach. It provided a sense of routine and security. There was also an emotional layer to it. The aroma of tomato soup rising from the stove could evoke memories of childhood lunches or family dinners long past. The warmth against tired hands, the gentle act of stirring, even the small ritual of adding a cracker on top. It created a sense of care in moments that might otherwise feel lonely. In its simplicity, this humble soup offered sustenance and solace. It required almost nothing from the diner, yet gave more than food alone. It gave calm, familiarity, and the quiet reassurance that even on the slowest, quietest evenings, there was still something small and comforting waiting on the table. By the time night had fully settled, many seniors found themselves seeking meals that demanded the least energy but offered the most comfort. One such supper was stewed apples, a dish that was both gentle on the teeth and soothing to the soul. It required no complex preparation, just fruit, a bit of water, and a slow simmer until the apples softened into tender, fragrant pieces. The beauty of stewed apples was in their simplicity. The cores and peels were often removed, but sometimes they stayed, adding a rustic texture and subtle flavor. Sugar or cinnamon could be added if available, but the fruit alone offered natural sweetness. By the time it was ready, the apples had transformed into a soft, warm mixture, almost like a gentle puree, easy to eat and digest. This dish had deep roots in American kitchens, particularly in homes where preserving fruit from the summer harvest was common. For seniors, it became more than just a way to avoid chewing. It was a link to past traditions. The smell of apples cooking, the warmth rising from the pot, and the subtle sweetness evoked memories of family kitchens, childhood afternoons, and the comforting rhythm of routine. There was also a practical side. Stewed apples could be prepared in advance and stored, providing a quick meal on evenings when energy was low. Yet the emotional weight was just as strong. Each spoonful offered familiarity and calm, a small pleasure that required nothing but patience to enjoy. Even alone, sitting by a dimly lit table, a bowl of stewed apples could turn an ordinary night into something quietly comforting. It proved that meals didn't need complexity or flair to nourish the body and the spirit. In its softness, warmth, and sweetness, it carried a gentle reminder. Sometimes, the simplest dishes left the longest impressions. And there you have it, a glimpse into the quiet, comforting dinners seniors relied on when cooking felt like too much. These no-chew suppers weren't just about ease. They carried memory, warmth, and a sense of home that went far beyond the plate. From creamy chipped beef to stewed apples, each dish tells a story of resilience, simplicity, and care. Next time you seek comfort in a meal, remember that sometimes the softest, simplest bites hold the deepest meaning. If you enjoyed stepping back into these kitchens of the past, make sure to subscribe and never miss another taste of America's lost recipes.